Jocko Willink, he is a Navy SEAL, he is a podcast host, he is a business owner, an author, and a TED speaker. And in this video, we're going to break down Jocko's TED Talk titled Extreme Ownership. As you're going to see, Jocko is a bit of an intense character, but he's a fantastic speaker, and there's an awful lot that we can learn. So we're going to analyze the first opening minutes of this talk, and I'm going to give you some key takeaways that you can use to become a more powerful communicator. Let's jump in.
War is a nightmare.
All right, before we go any further, let me just stop right here and tell you what Jocko has just done. So he hasn't come out and explained what he's going to talk about. He hasn't introduced himself. He hasn't said hello to everyone. He has come out with a statement. War is a nightmare. This is powerful, it's impactful, and it acts as a hook. It gets everyone's attention straight away. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see other people making when they're presenting or speaking is just adding so much fluff in at the start. People don't have the attention spans for it anymore. You have to go straight in and grab the speech by the throat, as an expression that Jocko would probably appreciate. Let's carry on.
War is awful. It is indifferent and devastating and evil.
When was the last time you used more than 2, 3, or even 4 descriptive words to describe something you were talking about? Nightmare, evil, disgusting, all of these powerful, emotive words that Jocko is using. Now, I know for a fact that Jocko had a background in English. I think he studied at university. And so even though he's a very, tough guy, he's got this literature background as well. And I think we're seeing this play out straight away here, just this great use of descriptive language.
War is hell. But war is also an incredible teacher.
Now, if you listen closely here, I feel like I can hear a little bit of a shake in Jocko's voice, and it looks like he's a little bit nervous, or at least he's got a lot of that adrenaline that you often experience when you first step out and see such a big audience. But what he's doing here is very interesting. He's using a bit of aggression. He's leaning in to his aggression rather than stepping away from what he's afraid of. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong when they are nervous on stage. They get hit with that anxiety, the adrenaline hits them, and rather than being the aggressor in the fight of the fight, flight, freeze system, they respond more of the flight way. They start to step back. They start to feel a little bit more like that prey animal rather than the predator. And all it does is make you feel even more nervous and even less confident. So sometimes a little bit of aggression can actually be a good thing to get you back into a state where you are feeling confident and you are on the front foot.
A brutal teacher. And it teaches you lessons that you will not forget.
Notice the pauses after each of these strong statements. He is leaving big full stops, and then he is waiting until he brings up the next sentence. And again, it adds so much weight and power to his words. If you go too fast, if you don't give the audience time to think, if you fire out one sentence out of the next, it loses its power. And so take a leaf out of Jocko's book here and get more used to, get more comfortable holding those pauses.
In war, you are forced to see humanity at its absolute worst. And you are also blessed to see humanity in its most glorious moments. War teaches you about sorrow and loss and pain. And it teaches you about the preciousness and the fragility of human life.
You see the emotion on his face there when he's saying these things, the preciousness and the fragility of human life. You can really tell that he feels this stuff. He's not reading it from a script. He's not just saying the words. He is feeling every word that he says. And we can tell that because we can hear it in his vocal tonality and we can see it in his facial expressions. And guess what? When you feel the words that you say, your audience will feel those emotions too.
And in that fragility, war teaches you about death. But war also teaches you about brotherhood and honor and humility and leadership. And unfortunately, war teaches you the most when things go wrong.
You'll notice that Jocko uses the rule of three a lot in this speech when things go wrong. This is when you take three words or you take a sentence and you give it three rhythmic beats to make the point. And what happens is when things come across in threes, they tend to just be more memorable and more impactful for the audience. So you'll see him talking about, war is this, and we did one, we did two, and we did three. And you'll notice it kind of layered throughout his talk. And it's a very powerful way to learn to communicate.
And for me, one of the most impactful lessons that I learned from war was in the spring of 2006 in the city of Ramadi, Iraq, which at the time was the epicenter of the insurgency, where brutal and determined terrorists ruled the streets with torture and rape and murder.
There's another use of the rule of three there: torture, rape, and murder. It's a nice one.
During an operation that I was in charge of, when all hell broke loose, we had multiple units out on the battlefield fighting the enemy. We had friendly Iraqi soldiers, we had U.S. Army soldiers and U.S. Marines, along with small elements of my SEAL team.
So notice how he used the rule of three there to communicate what was going on, but he also used his hand and his gestures to marry that up with a physical action. So we had this, we had that, and we had the other one. This is called counting. It's a super simple gesture, and it can make what you're saying just that much clearer and easier to follow for your audience. Jocko's doing a good job throughout this of using his hands, his body language. He's moving around the stage quite a lot. It seems a little bit pacey for my liking. I would probably recommend him to have a little bit more stillness contrasting with that movement. But when you step on stage, you've got a little red dot and you've got all that adrenaline. It's very easy to kind of keep wanting to move around just to get some of that energy out.
And then the fog of war rolled in, with its confusion and chaos and mayhem, and with its gunfire and enemy attacks and screaming men and blood and death. And in that fog of war,
just notice how much you are pulled into this scenario. He is really painting a picture for the audience here. Not a nice picture, let's be honest, but all the same, you feel like you are there. You can feel that fog of war. You can see the things that he is describing for you, and that's what we want. We're not here to just be told a nice story. We're here to be kind of pulled into this horrible environment, and the way he's doing that is through his descriptions, through his emotions, through his expressions, through his gestures. The whole thing is what is pulling us in.
Through a series of mistakes and human error and poor judgment and Murphy's Law and just plain bad luck, a horrendous firefight broke out. But this firefight, it wasn't between us and the enemy. This firefight, tragically, was between us and us.
So one final thing I'd like to point out here is there is a moment where the camera pans down from on top, and what we can see is this screen here in front of Jocko on the stage. Now, I just want to point out something that's quite interesting here, because on a lot of big stages, what speakers will have is a number of screens in front of them with the script being read out a little bit like a teleprompter. And it's a bit of a safety net so that while they're up there, if they draw a blank, they can scan down and see exactly where they need to be on the screen, but the audience can't tell. And usually if they're subtle about it, they would never know that they have been reading from the screen. But here on the stage, we can see that Jocko isn't doing this. He's just got a blank screen with his picture on it. So all of this is either being recited from memory or just from sheer familiarity. The difference I would describe there is memory is you've wrote a script and you've learnt it word for word and you are delivering it word for word. And I would say that this is probably what Jocko is doing because the language is so precise and because there has been no errors in what he has said. The other slight angle on that is that you can simply go through the speech so many times that the sentences and words start to solidify, even though you haven't wrote them down specifically. You just build so much of a pattern from that repetition that it kind of starts to form and be delivered the same way each time. But there's a little bit more wiggle room within that framework of doing it, as opposed to having a rigid script. But either way, what happens is, with either of those techniques, you become extremely well rehearsed, and you will notice that he's not having to think about what he's going to say. He's not using any filler words. He's not going off on any random tangents. Everything is exactly as it is meant to be. And when you're doing something as big as a TED Talk, that level of preparation is exactly what I would recommend. So anyway, let's wrap things up there, guys. There's some great takeaways here from Jocko's speech. As a summary to leave you with, I would say always open with something powerful and strong. Don't come in doing the same old predictable introductions that bores people before you've even started. Grab them, give them something exciting, and then lead into things afterwards. Also, use your descriptive language. Don't be afraid to have a vocabulary and to use it. People want to be sucked into a story, and a large part of the way that you do that is through your words and your language. The other thing that you do to bring people into your story is your voice, your expressions, and your delivery. If you don't feel what you're saying, then the audience aren't going to feel it too, and that is not going to help anyone. So make sure that when you're out there, whether you're talking about war and death, or you're talking about this brand new project or this business that you want to pitch, tap into the feelings that you want your audience to feel. If you want them to be excited, you need to speak with excitement. If you want them to feel proud, you need to speak with pride. Whatever you give out, that's what they're going to feel, and that's what they're going to reciprocate as well. So don't be afraid to show those emotions and really feel it. I would highly recommend you watch the rest of Jocko's talk. He goes on to tell this amazing story. It's very vulnerable. It's very, very personal. And the final message that he has for you about extreme ownership, the reason why it's so powerful is because it's a message that he had to learn the hard way. And he's telling you exactly where this came from and how he went through it and how he lived it before he started sharing it to other people. So it's a great speech. Hopefully you've enjoyed that breakdown. If you would like more tips, techniques, and analysis of public speaking, please comment below with any questions, like, subscribe, all of the different things wherever you're watching this. And I hope to see you on another video very soon.